Perfect. All right. So, sorry if you hear some clicking in the background. I'm actually looking at your absolutely gorgeous jewelry,
Thank you.
and I love that your jewelry matches you.
Yeah, I guess it does.
And seeing him like, okay, you look like you um, make these pieces. So I'm very curious to hear. I mean, it seems like it would be a difficult thing to get lab grown stones of any kind, but lab grown opals, and then to handcraft them. So how does that work? And how did you start your journey?
Well, I started my company like almost 11 years ago now when I
Oh,
had
wow.
just graduated college, and it was like the housing depression in 2008 and 2009, and so I couldn't find a job. I had just graduated college with like an art degree, and nobody wants that. So
I'm
uh,
assuming you're a middle millennial.
yeah, yes.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so yeah, this isn't my first rodeo, I guess. But yeah, so I started in Etsy because I just like had time and was hungry for creative work, and so I had a lot of success with that. It was when Etsy was a lot different, and I think the algorithm was a lot better too. Like all of these things, I was certainly like making a lot of sales on there, and then I just kind of followed it. I went back to a special program just for jewelry. It was like I think it was like a 4-month program in Portland. Um, Learned stone setting and all of that sort of stuff. So I have been doing it for a while. The style of it has evolved over the years. But yeah, and I had a brick and mortar shop in Portland for the last 5 years. And just at the beginning of 2020, I parted ways. I realized that I wasn't as suited for that element of it, that I really felt more at home just working with my hands, like doing the creative process of it, shooting all the photos. That was really where the joy was for me. So yeah, it was a big change, but this year has been really good because it's like I built a business and then decided to come back to my first love. So it's just been a rodeo. It's been a crazy time, but,
So where are
but
you originally from?
I'm from Colorado.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I've been in Portland for the last, oh gosh, I don't know, a long time, 8 years. I've been in Oregon for 15 years, but I'm actually living in Washington right now, in
Well,
Wenatchee, like way out in the middle of nowhere. So it's definitely been interesting to really like focus on um, just like be away from everything right now, and part of that's been difficult because it's with everything, all the protests and stuff going on in Portland, like wanting to pitch in and having to learn how to do my part from like afar and not being in the city that I've lived in for the last like 10 years. And so it's just, yeah, it's a lot of change for me right now. But I'm sorry, you asked me how I started my business and I just like told you.
no, it's okay. You have like so many things. I'm
I
like,
had a lot to
I
say.
gotta hold it back. I have so many questions. Um, so one question that I have is, you said that you started your business on Etsy, and along the way you went on this personal journey of like really studying your craft and learning how to make handmade jewelry. Why did you decide to, like I said, the lab grown part is so
Yeah.
interesting to me. How did that come into the
And
business?
yeah, I just lucked out into that one really. It's a company that I found when I was in Tucson, going to the Gem and Mineral Fair there. They do that every year. And I was like learning about this process, to be clear, like I don't grow the opals myself. I wish I knew how to do that. That would be really cool. And I've seen there's this guy on Instagram who grows his own crystals on all sorts of stuff, and it's so cool. But yeah, I just found this source, and I have seen lab grown, like when you're in jewelry school, they start you off with lab grown rubies, because if you break it, it only costs $1, but you can learn how to like do this. It's really hard. Stone setting was a big learning curve for me. But yeah, so there's a lot of different lab grown stones, and I'm hoping that it gets to be more popular. It becomes like the first choice instead of seen as like a counterfeit or like a fake or plastic, because it's a lot of these stones take like over a year to grow. They're made of the same substance. They're a silicate. I wish I knew the second word. Some sort of silicate dioxide. I think that's right. Don't quote me on that, but so it's the same chemical structure as a real opal, but it's just made in a lab, and it's not, there's no mining practices. A lot of opals come from Australia and Ethiopia, and some in Brazil. Those are the big spots. And so it's not, you can find opals in Eastern Oregon, but they're different. They're not like the type of opals that we're used to seeing that are like really flashy and pretty. And if you do find something like that, that's very rare. But there are some, but so when you're buying stones from other countries, you have to be really careful about what the practice is there, because generally you're buying from a couple people removed down the line. And so you just don't know what kind of mining practice there is, the sort of environmental hazard that goes along with that, and like the destruction that can happen when something goes wrong. And so I think the more pressure that we put on this type of industry, the more transparency we'll see. But until then, I'm happy to buy the lab grown stuff. I think it's really beautiful, and the people are really nice who I work with. So
that is, yeah, it's really beautiful. I actually just watched this docu-series on Netflix called Dirty Money. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't, but I heard about it recently.
Okay, so they have an episode on gold mining, and they talk about how, I think in Mexico, definitely one of the South American countries, a lot of the bigger drug dealers use gold mining to wash their money.
Oh, shit. So, yeah. Wow.
So those people who are, really, really poor, down and out, who need money to go in and mine, and they're like, you're mining gold. So the people mining are like, okay, I'm going to make so much money because it's gold and gold is worth a lot. But they wind up actually being trapped into slavery because they basically don't get paid anything. It's definitely not a livable wage. And because it's illegal, it's tied to the drug trafficking. They can't tell anyone.
And they're probably scared too.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many pieces to it. So when I was watching, I was like, I didn't know that this is where the story was going to go. But hearing you say, like, when you're buying from other countries, you really don't know what the mining practices are.
Right.
The regulations may be different. In this case, the regulations, there are strict regulations to protect people against human trafficking, but it's still happening. And so I do think for that reason, it makes more sense to buy like gems. But I think also there's like the idea that we're not disrupting the earth, which is also appealing,
Yeah.
So my question to you is, well, more of a statement than a question, but what I find in talking to different founders is we all kind of come into this space from a very personal place. My personal journey is ever extending. It started with food. So, yeah. It was like everything I ate would just make me sick, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And it made me really get interested in like eating plant-based or just eating healthier. Actually, and this was probably maybe 10 or 15 years ago. I too am a middle millennial, like I said. So it was really started in college because my parents were like so good about eating healthy. My mother's like, you're gonna eat salad with no dressing, and it was so much. But in college, I was like, I've been starving. I want to eat pizza and whatever else is best for me. and I just started feeling really sick. But because I was overloading my body with all those things, I couldn't figure out like which of the things were making me sick.
Yeah.
Um, so that was the first part. And then when I was like 27, I wound up working for an airport association. I had a coworker who had her own like brick and mortar boutiques. She had two of them at one point. And I was like, you're basically a superwoman. And I've also always wanted to have my own boutique. Like, how did you do it? She sat me down. She explained that a lot of her vendors were Chinese, and that was just how it goes. But I
Mm-hmm.
started doing research, and I was like, while I want to have a fashion business, I can't feel good about this. There's no way I would feel good about buying from vendors who just don't care about how they treat their
Right.
workers. Um, so that's the long way of asking you, what is your personal story on why a sustainable route to being a jewelry maker is important to
Mm.
you?
Um, yeah, I think I love what you said about how it starts somewhere different. And I'm a pescatarian, but I do think that these sorts of choices they permeate all areas of your life, which I think can also be difficult too. You know, when we learn new stuff and we're like, oh, we shouldn't be using plastic bags, but then reusable bags are more environmentally taxing, and it's just an ever evolving thing. So I think it can be a little discouraging sometimes to be trying to keep up. And certainly when I started doing jewelry, my mom was like, hey, we should go to Tucson. I know they have a big gem and mineral fair there. And I went, and I just like fell in love. I was like a kid in a candy shop, and I definitely just didn't even think to question. It's like everything else in my life I questioned, and I just never thought that like this was possibly destructive or that people were being exploited. Um, just because I didn't take the time to look a little bit more closely. And, you know, a lot of the times there would be like small miners there, just like grizzly old dudes uh, who were like dirty, and they would like be like, oh, you like this? Let me show you the stuff I got. And they pull out like, it's like, so like that felt really personal. And it was like, oh, okay, I can buy stuff from here and like feel like I'm supporting an individual in their like weird hobby. But then there was also vendors that were you could tell were huge, large scale operations. And I think our first trip was in 2013 or 14, and then I feel like crystals became like such a big trend that there was more and more demand for them. And you know, when that happens, things get sloppy. And it was already built on an industry that, you know, has a lot of colonialist roots, and power imbalances between who's making the money and who's actually doing the work. So yeah, it definitely, like, as I started to look more closely, it was kind of this realization of like, I can't support this industry with my buying power with my business. And when you think about it too, it's like, if you're gonna wear, I guess like wedding rings are the example, but if you're gonna wear like a piece of jewelry that symbolizes something for you, and it's made out of gold, or it's made out of, you know, it's like made with stones that are maybe mined by children, like that's a really bad vibe to have like held in an object that, you know, that you wear and that you carry. And like I think about like the history of adornment and how when you go to a museum or something, there's always like ancient jewelry. Everyone has done this. We've always wanted to like adorn ourselves, and I think it's a beautiful thing. And I think now we are tasked with the challenge of doing it in a way that honors what we actually believe in. And like, you know, some people don't care, and that's their path. But I think like when you do care, you unfortunately you just have to start questioning everything that you're consuming and figure out how to do it differently. So yeah, kind of just like a roundabout way, I guess, and a learning experience. You know, I definitely didn't start by me. I used a lot of crystals in my earlier work that, you know, I just had no idea where it came from. So that's the
I think,
honest truth.
no, I mean, when you said that like a wedding ring as an example, for you to wear that around, but maybe really be someone who does protest,
Mhm.
you know, human trafficking or anything in that realm, but you don't feel you have another choice. That really
Yeah.
resonated with me because I remember being in college, Blood Diamond came out,
Yeah.
and I was watching. I was like, "Oh my god!" Like all I ever wanted was a diamond ring.
Right.
You know? And I was like, "What am I gonna wear now?" Okay, no diamonds. But then you realize that it's not just the diamond. Like you said, it's also the gold. And I'm like, oh, okay, what am I gonna wear?
Yeah.
So I think I'm so thankful for this movement and
Mhm.
this space because I don't have to compromise. I'm
Yeah.
thankful for someone like you to take it upon yourself to be the person who's giving a consumer like me the opportunity to be able to make a purchase that is aligned with my morals.
Yeah.
So I have two more questions for you, but one is, and I guess you kind of touched on this, but how did this personal value then transpire to something that you wanted to offer to other women?
Um, I think it just became like a non-negotiable. It was like as I was kind of growing up into adulthood and like figuring out like who I was in the world, it was like I can't, on good conscience, like just continue to make jewelry that doesn't question that. And I started seeing more of it too, and it was like this is, there's an opportunity here to like be making things that in the past there hasn't been an option for. And I think it kind of just happened where it was like, okay, I've got to stop using this kind of crystal, and I need to get better about my sourcing for this one. um, and just like figuring it out piece by piece. And certainly like I have pieces in my collection that are left over from from before, and it's like utilizing pieces um, that I that might be fine, but I just don't know. So um, it's just like a building brick by brick and like moving towards like a more sustainable, because I feel like that's saying that something is sustainable or ethical. It's like it might be more that way, but like it's still creating like a new thing in the world that didn't exist before. So just doing the best I can.
It's so admirable. Okay,
Thank you.
so my last question is, you said that you are supporting, you know, the protests from afar. What does that look like for you?
um it's been some education, like doing just work on myself. I This is like the cliche, but like um, police, like white women start book groups. So yeah, I'm in a book group where, but yeah, reading more work from Black authors and trying to take in, like I do a lot of podcasts while I'm working. So I'm listening to like Good Ancestors right now. I'm listening to this one called, I just started it today. It's like, it's like good white parents or something, and it's about the school system in Brooklyn and how well-meaning people have like really made segregation continue in this way that like is offering like such a disparity in education. So that's part of it. I definitely like I live like in the middle of nowhere with my partner, and I don't leave the house very often. So I felt really like I can't do a whole lot from here, which has been frustrating. So definitely like educating myself has been the first step. And then I'm donating 25% of my profit um, to a different organization each month. And it feels small, but it's steady, and it's sustainable. Like I built it in so that it is not going to be more than I can give, because right now business is like a little slow with with COVID. But so that just, and like having that be a part of my business feels really good to just as business gets better, then I'm like reinvesting in my community. Um, what else? Supporting Black-owned business where I can. I just downloaded a app called Black Wallet, I think, and it's like you can type in anything and it'll connect you to a Black-owned business of like if you're looking for like hair products or like fashion or jewelry, and so that's kind of like a nice. I just love the way that like people are solving these sorts of problems with technology and like coming up with innovative solutions to connect people with each other. What else? And then I am like signing every petition that I can, you know, like that's just, it feels like it's not a whole lot, but you're like, okay, 5,000 other people signed this, I'm going to sign it. And then just not backing down from like the weird conversations with like family and friends on Facebook of being like a white person talking to other white people and saying like, this is not okay what you're saying, and like let's dissect it and like actually talk and, you know, try to get through without just like unfollowing and blocking, like, which is really tempting. It's hard to listen to some of that stuff, but trying to do that. I'm very like conflict avoidant person, so I'm trying to like just grow up a little bit and do better. So yeah.
I think that as women in our position, to round up the conversation, as women in our position, we have already placed ourselves in a space of leadership. So I'll tell you a little bit about my personal story, but with Soyel, every so often we do like marketing agency work. And it's just my background. I've been in digital marketing since I got out of college. And every time I take on, almost every time I take on a new client, I'm always faced with being the only Black woman in the room. And so I deal with just so many microaggressions that make your head spin. And I go to my friends, and some of them are like, that's just the way it is. And others are like, you have to do something. You have to fight back, because if you don't, it's only going to be harder for the next Black person or Black woman, especially, who comes in. And from this particular point in the movement, I'm saying how important it is to speak up, even if it doesn't feel like it's going to make a difference in that moment. This movement has been a true movement. Like every conversation has moved it a little bit further and a little bit further. And then you watch, you know, the docuseries about, unfortunately, the families who've been affected. So I just went back and watched the docuseries that Taija Sie produced around Trayvon Martin and his family. And one of the things that came out of that initially was his parents didn't even want to do anything. They just felt like, okay, this is something that happened. We're just going to have to deal with it.
Oh, wow.
His mom went into a deep depression, but fortunately, his dad reached out to a civil rights attorney who really pulled both of them out of the darkness and was like, okay, we got to go to the media. You have to tell your story. Imagine if his story was never told. We wouldn't even have this movement.
Yeah.
So I say that to say, no matter what our part is, it's so important. I can't have the conversations you can have with your family. And if I did, they're probably not even going to be received at all.
Yeah.
So I think what you're doing is so very important, because while it may not be our generation where everything changes, things will change. You know, we see it with the LGBT community, where when we were kids, it was just starting to be a normal conversation, and now it's like, are you serious? You can't. There's things you can't say. There's things you can't do, and my hope is that there will be that type of acceptance for the Black community. So I appreciate this really beautiful and deep conversation.
Yeah, I didn't expect it to go in this direction. It's cool. And I agree. I think it's like inspiring to see it, just like it's snowballing, you know, and it's like picking up in all different directions. Like I even like good, or like organizations that like we think are doing a good job. I'm seeing like call-ins of like, hey, this needs to change. Like there needs to be more people of color in leadership, and like just even with like nonprofits and stuff. And I'm just like, good, you know, everything does need to change. And it is inspiring. And like, I do think that there's hope, like that this is making a big difference. But yeah, like you said, it's slow, but change is gradual. But but yeah, this is nice to talk to someone about this. I'm just in my little world out here, like talk my boyfriend's ear off.
I totally understand. I'm gonna stop recording.
Okay.